When my water broke mid-presentation, staining the carpet of the 40th floor boardroom, my CEO looked from the spreading puddle back to my face and hissed, "Hold it in. We're not done discussing the 17% growth margin." As the first real contraction seized my body, a pain that felt like my spine was being twisted, I just smiled. I slowly closed my laptop, an action that triggered a kill script I'd coded months ago, and whispered "Initiate Phoenix Zero" into my smartwatch. He started screaming about insubordination and multi-million-dollar damages, but he had no idea that my resignation email had just hit his inbox and the entire project he'd built his year on was already beginning to digitally self-destruct. You won't believe what his company became overnight. The air in the 40th floor boardroom is a carefully curated lie. It's chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, filtered to remove the city's grit, and smells faintly of lemon-polished mahogany and old money. It's designed to be sterile to keep you alert, but today at 38 weeks pregnant it's just another thing my body has to fight. Every breath feels shallow, a sip of air when my lungs are screaming for a gallon. My baby, our little Noah, is nestled high up under my ribs, a constant loving pressure that has become my new normal. Right now though, he feels as heavy as a bowling ball. I'm standing at the head of the long, imposing table, my hand resting on my swollen belly, a subconscious gesture of reassurance for both of us. The other hand grips a small silver remote, my thumb hovering over the button to advance to the next slide. 22 slides down, 3 to go. My gaze is fixed on the only person in the room who matters, Mr. Harrison. Arthur Harrison, CEO founder, a man spoken of in the hushed, reverent tones usually reserved for deities or despots. He hasn't looked up from the leather-bound folio in front of him for the last 15 minutes, but I know he's listening. He hears everything. The slight tremor in my voice, the way my colleague Mark cleared his throat 2 slides ago when I mentioned the Q3 budget overruns. He's a predator who hunts with his ears. My voice is steady, a carefully constructed facade of corporate confidence I've spent the last 6 years perfecting. As you can see from the revised projections, implementing the Phoenix initiative in Q4 will not only mitigate the initial shortfall, but position us for a 17% growth margin by the end of the next fiscal year. I click the remote. A graph, elegant in its simplicity, fills the screen behind me. My graph. My numbers. My sleepless nights and sacrifice weekends distilled into a single, compelling image of corporate salvation. I poured everything into this project. David, my husband, had begged me to start my maternity leave 2 weeks ago. "Clara, please," he'd said, his warm hands massaging my aching feet. "You've done enough. The company will survive without you for a few months. We need you. No one needs you to rest." I'd smiled and kissed him, the scent of his sawdust and pine workshop a comforting anchor. "Just this one presentation, I promise. Phoenix is my baby. I need to see it fly." He'd sighed, that gentle, resigned sound he makes when he knows I'm being stubborn. He doesn't understand this world. He's a carpenter, a man who builds beautiful, tangible things with his hands. He left the corporate rat race years ago, a decision that came with a quiet, unspoken cost I never pressed him on. A falling out with his family, a door slammed shut somewhere in his past. All I knew was that he was happier for it, and his happiness was my own. But I needed this. I needed to prove to myself as much as to Mr. Harrison that I could do it all. That motherhood wouldn't make me less capable. It was a foolish, prideful thought, and I'm paying for it now. That's when I feel the first real warning. It's not like the Braxton Hicks contractions that have been my companions for weeks. Those harmless tightenings that feel like a belt being cinched around my belly. This is different. This is a low, sharp, insistent cramp that starts deep in my back and radiates forward. A hot wire pulling everything taut. I pause for a fraction of a second, my breath catching in my throat. I grip the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white against the dark wood. The faces around the table blur for a moment. There's Janice from marketing, her lipstick a perfect, unmoving slash of red. There's Mark from finance, already looking at his phone under the table. There are 6 other vice presidents, all men in identical gray suits, their expressions ranging from bored to impatient. They are Harrison's court, and they take their cues from him. I force myself to continue, my voice a little higher than before. The initial outlay for the software upgrade is significant, at approximately $250,000, but the long-term ROI is. The words turn to ash in my mouth. A second, more powerful clench seizes my entire midsection. It's a fist squeezing me from the inside out. I gasp, a small involuntary sound that cuts through the sterile air. Every head snaps up. For the first time, Mr. Harrison lifts his gaze from his papers. His eyes are the color of a winter sky, pale, cold, and vast. They hold no curiosity, no concern. Only annoyance. He looks at me as if I'm a faulty piece of equipment. And then I feel it. Not a trickle. A gush. A sudden, undeniable, mortifyingly warm rush of fluid that soaks through my underwear, my maternity panel, and begins to dampen the fabric of my navy blue dress. The sensation is so shocking, so primal, that for a moment I can't process it. My mind is a frantic scramble of denial and raw panic. No. Not here. Not now. Please God, no. The warm wetness is spreading down my thighs. I can feel it. Can they see it? The dark fabric of my dress will hide it for now, but the small puddle beginning to form at my feet will not lie. My carefully constructed presentation, my career, my dignity. It's all dissolving in a pool of amniotic fluid on a floor worth more than my car. My carefully prepared closing statement is gone, vanished from my memory. All the data, the projections, the confident assurances erased. My world has shrunk to this single horrifying moment. My voice, when it finally comes, is a stranger's. A thin, reedy whisper that sounds impossibly small in the vast, silent room. Mr. Harrison. I begin, my eyes pleading with his. My water. It just broke. Silence. Not a single person moves. Janice's red lips part slightly. Mark freezes, his thumb hovering over his phone screen. They all stare, not at me but at him. Waiting. His gaze doesn't waver. He doesn't blink. He simply holds me in that icy stare for a beat, then slowly, deliberately, looks back down at his notes. His voice is flat, devoid of any inflection, any humanity. It's the voice you'd use to report a stock price. Hold it in, Clara. We're not finished here. The words don't register at first. They float in the air, nonsensical. Did I hear him correctly? Did a human being actually just say that to another human being who is actively in labor? A wave of dizzying disbelief washes over me. So potent it almost makes me laugh. It has to be a joke. A cruel, bizarre power play joke. But his head remains bowed over his papers. The silence from the others is my answer. It's not a joke. This is my reality. Hot, stinging shame crawls up my neck, burning my cheeks. They are all watching me. I am a spectacle. The pregnant woman who couldn't even make it through a meeting. The unprofessional, hysterical female. I can feel their judgment, their discomfort, their silent prayers for me to just disappear so this awkwardness can end, and they can get back to their comfortable, predictable world. Another contraction rips through me, fiercer this time. A jagged blade of pain that steals my breath and makes my vision swim. A single hot tear escapes and traces a path through my makeup. My hand, which had been resting on my belly, is now clutching it. A desperate protective shield. I am completely, utterly alone. My baby is coming, and I am trapped in a cage of corporate etiquette, surrounded by people who have forgotten how to be human. I can't. I manage to choke out the words thick with tears and pain. My legs are trembling. The need to bear down is a primal, overwhelming urge. The baby is coming. Now, this time he does look up. He lifts his head slowly, and his eyes, those two chips of granite, pin me to the spot. There is a flicker of something in their depths. Not sympathy. Annoyance. Pure, unadulterated annoyance at this interruption, this mess. This company, Clara, he says, his voice low and dangerous, each word a perfectly polished stone dropped into the silence, was not built on personal inconveniences. Your presentation is concluded when I say it is. You can leave when I dismiss you. That's it. That's the moment the world shifts. The shame, the fear, the humiliation, they all burn away, consumed by a sudden, clarifying blast of white-hot rage. Inconvenience? This life inside me, this tiny, perfect person that David and I have dreamed of, hoped for, planned for, this miracle is an inconvenience? My son. My child. He is not an inconvenience. He is everything. A strength I didn't know I possessed surges through me. It's the mama bear instinct they write about. A force of nature that is raw and untamable. With a grunt of effort, I push myself away from the table. My expensive ergonomic chair, a symbol of my senior status, scrapes loudly against the polished floor. A sound of violent protest in the sanctified quiet. I stand tall, or as tall as I can, with the weight of new life pulling me toward the earth. I meet Mr. Harrison's glare, and for the first time I am not afraid of him. He is just a man. A small, cold, pathetic man in a ridiculously expensive suit. My child, I say, and my voice doesn't shake. It rings with a clarity and a power that shocks even me. Is not an inconvenience. I don't wait for a reply. I don't look at the stunned faces of my colleagues. I turn my back on all of it. On the presentation still glowing on the screen, on the $500 million company, on the career I had sacrificed so much for. I walk. Each step is deliberate. I can feel the dampness of my dress clinging to my legs, the rhythmic clenching of my womb, the terrifying, exhilarating reality of what is happening. I leave a trail of wet footprints on the pristine floor. I am marking my territory. I am claiming my freedom. I walk out of that boardroom, leaving a stunned, absolute silence and the faint scent of my perfume in my wake. I don't know if I have a job to come back to. I don't know anything for certain, except that I am a mother, and I am going to meet my son. The walk to the elevator feels like a mile. Every head in the open-plan office turns as I pass. A sea of curious faces. I ignore them. My focus is singular. Get to the lobby. Get a taxi. Get to the hospital. Get to David. My hand is already in my purse, fumbling for my phone. The elevator doors slide open with a gentle chime. As they close, sealing me in the small mirrored box, I finally see my reflection. My face is pale, streaked with mascara. My hair is coming loose from its professional chignon. My blue dress is stained. I look like a mess. I look like a warrior. My thumb, slick with sweat, finally manages to unlock my phone. I pull up David's contact. My fingers are clumsy, shaking too much to type. I hit the call button instead. It rings once, twice. Clara. Is the meeting over? David? I gasp, leaning my head against the cool metal wall of the elevator as another contraction builds, cresting like a tidal wave. It's time. It's happening. The baby's coming. I hear a crash on his end of the line, the sound of wood clattering to the floor. What? Where are you? Are you okay? His voice is a bomb, a rush of pure love and concern that cuts through my panic. I'm in the elevator. I walked out. You walked out? What happened? I'll tell you later. Harrison. I can't even form the words. The injustice is a physical thing, a lump in my throat. Just meet me at St. Mary's Hospital. The main entrance. I'm getting a cab now. I'm on my way. I love you. Breathe, Clara. Just breathe. I'm on my way. The line clicks off. The elevator doors open to the grand marble lobby. The security guard at the front desk looks up, his eyes widening as he takes in my state. I don't care. I push through the heavy glass doors and out into the chaotic symphony of the city. The cool afternoon air hits my face. Feels real. Feels clean. As I raise my hand to hail a cab, my phone buzzes in my hand. A new email. The subject line is stark automated. From HR Services. Subject. Notice of immediate termination. I stare at the words, a fresh wave of cold fury washing over me. They didn't even wait an hour. They didn't even wait for me to get off the property. I was erased. Fired while in labor, for the crime of my body doing what it was made to do. I look up from my phone, at the monolithic glass and steel tower of Harrison Industries scraping the sky. A monument to a man's ego, built on the backs of people he considered inconveniences. I thought about the 17% growth margin I just handed him. I thought about the nights, the weekends, the life I'd poured into that place. And I thought about his face, that cold, dismissive glare. Something inside me hardens. The pain of the contractions is still there, but now it has a companion. A quiet, chilling, methodical resolve. This isn't over. He didn't just fire an employee. He declared war on a mother. And he has no idea who he's dealing with. A taxi pulls to the curb, and as I climb in, I make a silent promise to the tiny life fighting its way into the world. I will protect you, and I will make him pay. The taxi driver, a man with a kind, weathered face, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with a concern that felt more genuine than anything I'd experienced in the last 5 years. "Hospital, miss? Which one?" "City General," I gasped, my knuckles white as I gripped the door handle. Another contraction seized me, a relentless, crushing wave that stole my breath and made the city lights outside the window blur into streaks of neon paint. The email on my phone screen burned in my mind, each word a brand of betrayal. *immediate termination. "Hang in there," the driver said, weaving through traffic with a skill born of decades navigating this concrete jungle. "My wife with our first. She nearly broke my hand. You're doing great." His simple kindness was a pinprick of light in the consuming darkness of my fury. I wasn't just an inconvenience. I was a woman bringing a child into the world, a universal primal act that Harrison had tried to subjugate to a quarterly report. The arrogance was breathtaking, the cruelty unforgivable. When we screeched to a halt in front of the emergency entrance, a man was already there, pacing, his face a mask of anxiety under the harsh fluorescent lights. "David. My David." He saw me through the taxi window and his expression shifted from worry to sheer panic. He wrenched the door open before the driver had even put the car in park. "Clara. Oh my God, what happened? I got your text, I came as fast as I could." He paid the driver in a flurry of crumpled bills, not even waiting for change before scooping me into his arms. His embrace was my anchor. He was a high school history teacher. His world was dusty textbooks and the bright, chaotic minds of teenagers, a universe away from the sterile savagery of Harrison Industries. "He fired me, David," I whispered against his chest as he half-carried me towards the sliding doors, the pain of the contraction mingling with the sharp agony of the words. "What? When?" "Just now. By email. While I was in a cab in labor." David stopped dead in the middle of the bustling ER entrance. A nurse pushing a wheelchair swerved around us. "He what?" The quiet disbelief in his voice was swiftly replaced by a low, rumbling anger I rarely heard. "That son of a bitch. I'm going to kill him." "Later," I managed, another contraction buckling my knees. "Baby first. Vengeance later." The hours that followed were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and the steady, calming presence of David. He held my hand, he wiped my brow. He whispered encouragements that were my lifeline. He never once mentioned Harrison Industries again. He was focused entirely on me, on us, on the new life we were about to meet. And in the crucible of that delivery room, my own resolve was forged into something unbreakable. Every searing pain was a reminder of Harrison's dismissal. Every push was a push against him, against the world he represented. I wasn't just delivering a baby. I was birthing a warrior. At 3:17 a.m., with the city sleeping outside our window, Leo Samuel Chun let out his first mighty cry. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a tuft of dark hair, and my husband's eyes. As the nurse placed him on my chest, his tiny wrinkled body warm against my skin, the world fell away. The boardroom, the email, the cold fury. It all dissolved in the overwhelming tidal wave of love that washed over me. His small hand curled around my finger, a grip of surprising strength. I looked at David, his face streaked with tears, and I knew this was the only thing that mattered. This tiny, helpless person. My son. The promise I made in the taxi echoed in my soul, no longer silent, but a roaring declaration. I will protect you. The first 2 days were a cocoon of new parent bliss and exhaustion. We learned the intricate art of swaddling, the subtle language of a newborn's cries, the profound peace of watching him sleep. My world had shrunk to the size of our private hospital room, and for a moment, I let myself believe it could stay that way. On the 3rd day, a courier arrived. He delivered a thick, crisp envelope addressed to me. Inside, on heavy, embossed letterhead from the most expensive law firm in the city, was a letter. It wasn't a letter of apology. It was a declaration of war. It outlined, in meticulous and threatening legalese, the terms of my separation. It cited gross insubordination and abandonment of professional duties. It reminded me of the ironclad NDA I had signed, warning of severe financial and legal repercussions should I ever discuss any aspect of my work or the circumstances of my departure. And then came the final brutal twist. The severance package. It was a single week's pay. An insult so profound it was clearly designed to be one. A message. Asterisk, you are worthless to me. You are nothing. Asterisk, tucked inside was the check. A flimsy piece of paper that felt like a slap in the face. They can't do this, David said, his voice shaking with rage as he read the letter over my shoulder. Leo stirred in my arms and I rocked him gently, my gaze fixed on the signature at the bottom of the page. Asterisk, Eleanor Vance, senior partner, on behalf of Harrison Industries. They can, I said, my voice eerily calm. They think they can. They think I'm just a hormonal sleep-deprived new mother who will be too overwhelmed to fight back. They think they can bury me in legal threats and I'll just disappear. We'll sue them, David insisted. Wrongful termination, discrimination. This is an open and shut case, Clara. A lawsuit could take years, David. Years of depositions, motions, appeals. He has infinite resources. He'll drown us in legal fees. He wants to bleed us dry, to make an example of me. I folded the letter, the sharp crease a satisfying sound. He's playing checkers. He doesn't realize I've been playing chess for him for the last 5 years. When we brought Leo home, our small sun-filled apartment felt like a sanctuary. But for me it was also a war room. While David handled night feeds to let me rest, I wasn't always sleeping. Propped up on pillows, with Leo asleep in a bassinet by our bed, the blue light of my personal laptop illuminated my face. I wasn't just a former vice president of strategy. I was the architect of Harrison's last 3 years of unprecedented success. I knew the company's nervous system. I knew its strengths and, more importantly, I knew its hidden, festering weaknesses. Harrison had erased my digital existence at the company, deleting my email, revoking my access. But he'd underestimated my foresight. For the past year, sensing a change in his demeanor, a growing paranoia, I had been backing up key files to a personal encrypted hard drive. Not proprietary algorithms or trade secrets. I wasn't a thief. I'd backed up my own work, strategy memos, email chains, project timelines, and market analysis. Evidence of my value. And buried within it all, evidence of Harrison's methods. I didn't need a typical employment lawyer. I needed a giant killer. My research led me to a name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in legal circles. Anya Sharma. She was a former prosecutor who had left the DA's office to start her own boutique firm specializing in taking on corporate behemoths. Her record was terrifyingly successful. Her tagline, plastered subtly at the bottom of her website, was simple. Asterisk, we don't level the playing field. We flip the whole damn table. I secured a video consultation. When Anya's face appeared on my screen, she was exactly as I'd pictured. Sharp, intelligent eyes, an expression that tolerated no nonsense, and an aura of controlled intensity. I was holding a sleeping Leo in a carrier against my chest. Mrs. Chun, she began, her voice crisp. Congratulations on your son. You said on the phone this was a matter of some urgency. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid it all out. The boardroom, Harrison's words, the immediate termination, the insulting severance, the threatening letter from Eleanor Vance. Anya listened, her expression unreadable. It's a strong case for discrimination based on pregnancy and medical condition, she said when I finished. But your husband is right. Harrison will drag it out. It will be a war of attrition. What is it you want, Clara? A settlement? Your job back? My job? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. I wouldn't work for that man again if he offered me the company. And this isn't just about a settlement, Anya. That's what he expects. He thinks he can solve this with money. I want him to understand consequence. I want to dismantle the myth of Alastair Harrison, the infallible visionary. A flicker of interest in Anya's eyes. That's a taller order. To do that, you need leverage. Something more than a wrongful termination suit. You need something that frightens him. I leaned closer to the camera. The 17% growth margin I presented in that meeting, I said softly. It was the culmination of a year-long initiative I designed and led. Project Chimera. I've read about it in the financial press, Anya said. Harrison Industries' aggressive and successful move into green energy tech. Aggressive is one word for it, I replied. The centerpiece of Chimera was the acquisition of a small, brilliant solar panel startup called Salas Dynamics. The official story is that Harrison Industries made a generous offer, and they were happy to be acquired. The truth is, I have email chains originating from Harrison himself, detailing a systematic campaign to strangle them. He covertly bought up their suppliers through shell corporations, drove up their material costs until they were on the brink of bankruptcy, and then swept in with a lowball offer they had no choice but to accept. It was predatory. It was ruthless. And while not strictly illegal if the full story came out with proof, the man who built his public image on being a titan of ethical capitalism would be exposed as a fraud. His shareholders, not to mention the board, would be displeased. Anya Sharma was silent for a long moment. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Clara Chan, she said, the name sounding like a verdict. I think you and I are going to get along splendidly. Our first move wasn't a lawsuit. It was a whisper. Anya had a contact, a veteran investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal known for his tenacity and his discretion. We crafted the narrative carefully. An anonymous source, a high-level former executive, deeply troubled by the company's ethical direction. We didn't give him everything, just a taste. A few carefully selected, partially redacted emails that hinted at the predatory strategy behind the Salas Dynamics acquisition. Enough to light a fire. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. It was cautiously worded but explosive. It didn't name Harrison directly in the scheme, but it raised serious questions about the unusually aggressive tactics used in the acquisition that was the cornerstone of their recent success. The effect was immediate. Harrison Industries stock wobbled, dipping 3% by noon. It wasn't a crash, but it was a tremor, a sign of instability. Online forums for investors lit up. The board, I knew, would be convening emergency calls. Harrison's carefully curated image had been scratched. David read the article on his phone, his eyes wide. The first move, I said, burping Leo over my shoulder. He thinks the fight is with me. He's wrong. The fight is with his own reputation. It's the only thing he truly values. The response came 3 days later. Not in the form of a letter, but a knock on the door. It was a woman in a flawlessly tailored gray suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried a slim leather briefcase. Clara Chen? She asked, her voice as smooth and cold as river stones. I'm Eleanor Vance. I believe you've received my correspondence. David moved to stand beside me, a protective wall. She has nothing to say to you. Eleanor's gaze flickered to David, dismissing him in an instant, before settling back on me. Her eyes took in the baby carrier, my tired expression, the spit-up stain on my shoulder I hadn't noticed. I could see the calculation in her eyes. This is who I'm up against? May I come in? She asked. It wasn't a question. No, I said simply. I shifted Leo slightly in the carrier. You can say what you need to say right here. A faint, annoyed tightening of her lips. Mr. Harrison is a generous man. He recognizes that your departure was abrupt. He is prepared to offer you a revised severance package. 1 year's salary. Full healthcare coverage for you and your family for 5 years. In exchange for your signature on an expanded, permanent non-disclosure agreement. It was an incredible offer. Life-changing money. More than enough to secure our future, to remove all of our financial worries. It was the smart play, the safe play. David looked at me, his expression unreadable. He wanted this nightmare to be over. I could see it. I looked at Eleanor Vance, at the smug certainty on her face. She was offering me a golden cage. She was offering me blood money to forget, to be silent, to let him win. To let him believe that everyone and everything has a price. I thought of his face in that boardroom. Hold it in, Clara. I thought of the email. Immediate termination. I looked down at the sleeping head of my son, his breath a warm puff against my chest. Tell Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of all my conviction, that my silence is not for sale. Eleanor's professional mask finally cracked. A flash of genuine shock. Mrs. Chun, I urge you to reconsider. This is an exceptionally generous offer. You won't get a better one. Oh, I'm not looking for a better offer, Eleanor, I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. I'm not looking for a settlement at all. You tell him that. You tell him this isn't about money. This is about education. I'm going to teach Alistair Harrison the one lesson he never bothered to learn. The true meaning of return on investment. I closed the door gently in her stunned face, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden silence of the hallway. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my heart pounding. The truce was over. The first shot had been fired, and I had just refused their terms of surrender. This was no longer a skirmish. This was war. The click of the lock was a gunshot in the quiet of our apartment. For a moment I didn't move, my forehead pressed against the solid reality of the door. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A wild bird caught in a cage of my own making. I had done it. I had stared into the abyss of Alastair Harrison's power and wealth, and I hadn't blinked. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving a hollow, trembling space in its wake. Leo stirred in my arms, his little mouth making sucking motions in his sleep. He was my anchor. He was my why. Clara. David's voice, thick with concern, came from the living room. I heard the creak of the armchair as he stood. I took a deep, shuddering breath and turned from the door, forcing a strength I didn't feel into my legs. I walked back into the soft lamplight of our home, a sanctuary that suddenly felt fragile, like a sandcastle against a rising tide. David's face was a mask of anxiety. He had heard the voices, the sharp, corporate cadence of Eleanor Vance, and then my final quiet declaration. What happened? What did she want? He asked, his hands finding my shoulders, his eyes searching mine. She came with an offer, I said, my voice still hushed. I shifted Leo, settling his warmth more securely against me. From your father. David's jaw tightened. A decade of pain flickered in his eyes. Money. It wasn't a question. I nodded. A lot of it. A settlement. For the unfortunate incident. For my silence. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Of course. The Harrison solution. Throw money at the problem until it goes away. He looked down at Leo, his expression softening with a fierce, protective love. He thinks he can buy his way out of what he did to you. To us. I told her no, I said, and the strength was back, real this time, rising from a wellspring deep inside me. I told her my silence wasn't for sale. David's hands tightened on my shoulders, his gaze snapping back to mine. There was surprise, then a slow dawning pride that was more potent than any settlement check could ever be. You did? I did. I managed a small, tired smile. I told her I was going to teach him a lesson about return on investment. He stared at me for a long moment, the full weight of my decision settling between us. He knew what this meant. He knew the power his father wielded, the resources he could bring to bear. He could crush us, ruin my career prospects forever, tie us up in legal battles until we bled dry. But instead of fear, I saw a new fire ignite in his eyes, a reflection of the one burning in my own heart. Good, he said, his voice raw with emotion. He pulled me into his arms, careful of the precious bundle between us. Good. To hell with his money. We don't need it. We have this. He kissed the top of Leo's head, then my forehead. Whatever comes next, we face it together. In his arms, with our son nestled between us, the fear receded. The battle lines were drawn, but for the first time I felt like I had an army at my back. The next few days were a strange mix of domestic bliss and strategic planning. We lived in a bubble of new parenthood, the 3 feedings, the endless diaper changes, the quiet moments just staring in awe at Leo's tiny, perfect face. But outside that bubble, the war was brewing. The silence from Harrison Corporation was deafening. A coiled snake waiting to strike. We met with a lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Maria Flores, recommended by a friend. We sat in her modest office, Leo sleeping in his carrier at our feet. I recounted the entire story, from the boardroom humiliation to Eleanor Vance's visit. Maria listened intently, her pen still. When I finished, she looked at me, her expression one of profound respect. Mrs. Chun, she began, her voice measured. Legally, you have a powerhouse of a case. Wrongful termination, hostile work environment, emotional distress. We could sue them for a figure that would make their offer look like pocket change. That's not what I want, I said firmly. David reached over and took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. I understand, Maria said, a small smile touching her lips. You told Ms. Vance this was about education. So what's the curriculum? And so we drafted our real terms. It wasn't a lawsuit, it was a manifesto. It was a list of demands that couldn't be measured in dollars. First, a full, public and personal apology from Alastair Harrison. Not a corporate statement full of legalese, but his own words, admitting what he did and the culture of fear he had fostered. Second, the establishment of a new comprehensive parental leave and employee welfare policy at Harrison Corporation, to be drafted and overseen by an independent, third-party ethics committee. It would include mandatory sensitivity training for all senior management, starting with the CEO. Third, a $5 million endowment, in my name, to a national foundation that provided legal and financial support for working mothers who had faced workplace discrimination. The money wasn't for me. It was for all the other women who didn't have the strength or the unique leverage I possessed to fight back. And the final term, the most important one. The one David and I had discussed late into the night. It was the true return on investment. If Alastair Harrison ever wanted to be a grandfather to Leo, he would have to earn it. Not with gifts or trust funds, but with time, with humility, with genuine change. There would be no relationship until he had fulfilled the first 3 demands to our satisfaction. His investment would be his pride. The return would be his family. Maria sent the letter. The silence from the other side was broken. The snake had been prodded. Now we waited for it to strike or to surrender. 2 days later our buzzer rang. It was late evening, the sky outside a bruised purple. Leo was fussy, and I was pacing the living room with him on my shoulder, patting his back. David went to the intercom. "Who is it?" A pause, then a voice crackled through the small speaker. A voice I recognized with a jolt of ice in my veins. It was stripped of its usual authority, sounding strained and tired. "It's Alastair. Alastair Harrison. I need to speak with Clara. Please." David and I exchanged a look of disbelief. He hadn't sent Eleanor. He hadn't sent a team of lawyers. He had come himself. This was it. The confrontation. "Let him up," I whispered, my heart starting its frantic drumming again. David hesitated, his protective instincts warring with the necessity of this moment. He nodded grimly and pressed the button. The few minutes it took for the elevator to ascend felt like an eternity. I handed Leo to David, who held him close, a silent guardian. I stood by the door, my hands clasped in front of me to stop them from shaking. This had to be on my terms. In my home. On my ground. The knock was soft, hesitant. Not the rap of a titan of industry, but the tap of an old man. I opened the door. Alastair Harrison looked smaller than I remembered. The tailored suit was immaculate, but it hung on him as if he'd lost weight. His face was gaunt, the skin pale and stretched thin over his sharp cheekbones. The granite chip eyes were clouded with something I had never seen in them before. Desperation. He wasn't holding a briefcase. His hands were empty, hanging awkwardly at his sides. He looked at me, then his gaze slid past me to David holding Leo. His breath hitched. A profound, aching sorrow filled his eyes as he looked at the grandson he had never met, the son he had disowned. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice raspy. I stepped aside. He walked into our small foyer, looking utterly out of place, a shark in a goldfish bowl. He didn't move towards the living room, just stood there, a man adrift. "I received your letter," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor between us. "My lawyers, they advised me to ignore it. They called it absurd, unenforceable." He looked up, and the full force of his brokenness hit me. "They don't understand." "No," I said, my voice clear and steady. "They don't. They think in terms of liability and exposure. They don't understand value." "I thought I did," he whispered, a confession. "My entire life, I've built an empire on understanding value. Assets, acquisitions, market share, profit margins." He finally met my gaze. I was wrong. I confused price with worth. I didn't know the first thing about true value until I saw your name on that file next to his. His gaze flickered to David. Until I realized what I had done. David took a step forward, his voice low and tight with a decade of resentment. "What you did. You told my 8.5 months pregnant wife to hold it in while she was in labor. You humiliated her. You endangered her. You endangered your own grandchild. Do you have any idea what that's like? To build a life so separate from you, to finally be happy, only to have your shadow fall over us in the cruelest way imaginable? Tears welled in Alistair's eyes, and this time they fell, tracing paths through the wrinkles on his face. The sight was so shocking, so completely alien, that it silenced the room. I know, he choked out. There is no excuse. There is no explanation. It was monstrous. I was a monster. He took a shaky breath. When I was building the company, I stripped everything human out of myself. Compassion, empathy, they were liabilities, weaknesses. I thought I had to be made of iron to succeed. I forgot how to be a man. I forgot how to be a father. He looked from David to me, his expression pleading. The things you've asked for. The apology, the policy changes, the endowment. I'll do it. I'll do all of it. Not because you're forcing me to, but because it's the right thing to do. It's the first step in dismantling the man I was. He took a hesitant step closer, his eyes locked on Leo, who was now awake, his dark eyes wide and curious. Your final term, Alistair said, his voice cracking. That's the one that matters. The others are just business. Reparations. But that last one, that's about family. He looked at David. I threw you away, son. For my pride. For my business. It was the single greatest loss of my life, and I was too arrogant to even admit it was a loss. And you, Clara? He turned to me, his gaze full of a shame so profound it was painful to witness. You showed me what true strength is. Not bullying people from a boardroom, but standing up for what is right for your child in the face of it. You have more character in your little finger than I had in my entire being. He stopped a few feet away, a chasm of his own making separating him from his family. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I haven't earned it. I'm just asking for a chance to start. To make the investment. Please. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken history. I looked at David. His face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, hurt, but also a glimmer of the love for a father he thought he had lost forever. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The decision was mine. I was the one who had been wronged. I was the one setting the terms. The public apology comes first, Alistair, I said, my voice softer now. Then the announcement of the policy changes and the endowment. We will be watching. Of course, he said immediately, relief flooding his features. Whatever you say. And then, I continued, we'll see. It was all he could hope for. It was more than he deserved. He nodded, a broken man clinging to a thread of hope. He looked one last time at Leo, a look of pure, unadulterated longing, before turning and walking out of our apartment. I closed the door, and this time the click of the lock didn't sound like a gunshot. It sounded like a beginning. A week later, Alistair Harrison held a press conference. It was broadcast on every major news network. He stood at a podium, not in his office, but in a neutral hotel ballroom. He looked older, humbled. He didn't read from a script. He spoke from the heart. He told the world about a corporate culture he had built that prized profit over people. And then he looked directly into the camera. But my greatest failing was not corporate, it was human, he said, his voice steady. I want to publicly apologize to a former employee, Mrs. Clara Chun. In a moment of profound crisis for her, I showed a lack of humanity that I will regret for the rest of my life. Her strength and integrity in the face of my cruelty have been a necessary and painful lesson for me. She is a better person than I am, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry. He went on to announce the sweeping policy changes and the endowment, framing them not as a settlement, but as the first step in rebuilding Harrison Corporation's moral foundation. It was a stunning act of public self-immolation and rebirth. It was everything I had demanded and more. 2 weeks after that, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, the buzzer rang again. This time when David answered, he simply said, "Come on up." Alistair arrived wearing not a suit, but a simple sweater and slacks. He carried a small, clumsily wrapped gift. He was nervous, his hands trembling slightly. I was sitting on the couch, Leo lying on a playmat at my feet. Alistair walked in and stood awkwardly in the center of the room. "Hello," he said quietly. "Hello, Alistair," I replied. David came and stood beside him. "He's awake," David said, gesturing to Leo. Alistair looked at his grandson, cooing and kicking on the mat, and his carefully composed expression crumbled. "He's beautiful," he breathed. He has your eyes, David. Would you like to hold him?" I asked. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock and gratitude. He could only nod, speechless. David showed him how to wash his hands, and then I carefully lifted Leo and placed him into his grandfather's arms. Alistair was stiff, terrified, holding the tiny baby as if he were made of priceless, fragile glass. But as Leo settled against his chest, gurgling happily, something in Alistair softened. The tension left his shoulders. He looked down at the small face and a genuine, unforced smile touched his lips for the first time. He had made his investment. This was the first return. Months turned into a year. Alistair became Grandpa. He was a constant, gentle presence in our lives. He never offered business advice or talked about money. Instead, he learned to change a diaper. He learned which storybook was Leo's favorite. He learned to be present, to listen, to love without condition. The iron had melted away, revealing the man underneath. On Leo's first birthday, our small apartment was filled with friends, laughter, and the scent of cake. Alistair sat on the floor, surrounded by wrapping paper, showing Leo how a new wooden toy worked. He looked up and caught my eye, a look of quiet, profound gratitude on his face. I smiled back, my heart full. I looked at David, laughing as he put a party hat on a protesting Leo. I looked at the man who had once been my nemesis, now just a grandfather delighting in his grandson. The war was long over. There were no victors in the traditional sense, no vanquished enemies. I hadn't won a settlement. I had won a family. I had taught Alistair Harrison the true meaning of return on investment, and in doing so we had all received a dividend beyond any price. A future together.